They laughed when I showed up in work boots. My own wife joined in, calling me her blue-collar husband like it was cute. At her sister's wedding, the groom's father made me the punchline in front of 200 guests. I stayed silent, pulled out my phone, and showed the groom one email. He went white. His father went broke. And my wife, she learned that the man she'd been mocking for 20 years owned everything she thought made her important. My name is Robert Harrington. Most people call me Rob. I'm 49 years old, and for the last 23 years, I've been in the energy business. Started at the bottom, worked my way up through grit and long nights that turned into long years. I was the guy installing solar panels on commercial rooftops in Phoenix when it was 115 degrees, when most people thought renewable energy was a pipe dream for hippies and dreamers. By the time I hit 37, I wasn't just working in solar energy. I owned it. 5 solar farms across 3 states, contracts with municipalities that would make your head spin, and a portfolio that could fund a small country's infrastructure. But here's the thing. Nobody knew. I retired early. That's what the paperwork said. Anyway, what I really did was step back, restructure everything under a Delaware trust called Clearview Energy Holdings. Boring name. On purpose. The kind of name that sounds like a failed tech startup or a community credit union. I wanted silence, not spotlights. I'd spent enough years in boardrooms with men who wore too much cologne and had too little spine, men who talked big and delivered small. So I disappeared into the background, ran everything from my home office with a second phone and a laptop that had more security than a federal building. Then I met Jennifer. Jen. She liked that I wasn't flashy, said I felt steady, dependable, like a good investment that wouldn't tank overnight. She didn't ask many questions about what I did before we got married, and I didn't volunteer much. I told her I'd retired early from the energy sector, made some smart investments, kept things simple. That was enough for her. I think she liked the idea of being the ambitious one, the one still climbing while I'd already plateaued and settled into a comfortable routine. We had 2 kids. Tyler, 25 now, getting his MBA at Wharton. Madison, 22, in her second year of med school at Johns Hopkins. Both schools cost more than most people's mortgages, but I never blinked. Jen thought they'd earned scholarships, special grants from some foundation with a name she never bothered to look into. The foundation was me. I'd set it up years ago, funneled the tuition through it, so the kids would think they'd earn it on merit alone. Jen knew the truth but never told them. She liked them thinking they were exceptional without needing my help, without owing me anything. I still wore the same boots I'd worn when I was managing solar installation sites 15 years ago. Drove a 10-year-old Ford pickup that Jen hated with a passion. She'd tell her friends I was charmingly stubborn, that I had blue-collar roots I couldn't shake. What she really meant was that I embarrassed her. I didn't fit the aesthetic she was building on Instagram, the one where she was married to someone successful, but just mysterious enough to be interesting without overshadowing her. I never corrected her. Why would I? The truth was, I didn't need anyone to know what I'd built. Power doesn't come from being seen. It comes from being underestimated, from sitting quietly while everyone else assumes you're irrelevant. And then came the wedding invitation. Her sister's big day. 200 guests at some vineyard estate. I had a feeling it was going to be interesting. The vineyard estate was exactly what you'd expect. White tents, string lights, 200 guests dressed like they were attending a royal wedding. Jen had insisted I wear slacks and a button-down, but I drew the line at the sport coat. Compromised with a clean pair of jeans and my usual boots. She gave me that look, the one that said I was embarrassing her before we even got out of the truck, but she didn't say anything. Not yet. The ceremony was fine. Standard vows, crying bridesmaids, the whole production. It was the reception where things got interesting. I was standing near the catering tent, nursing a warm can of Coke, because apparently bottled water wasn't fancy enough for the welcome toast, when Frank Millerson took the microphone. He was the groom's father, 61 years old, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my truck. Brett, his son, stood next to him, looking uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. Frank raised his champagne glass, that self-satisfied smirk plastered across his face. You know, Frank said, his voice carrying across the reception, some folks just never evolve, still clinging to their blue-collar pride like it's some kind of badge of honor. He gestured vaguely in my direction. Bless their hearts. Laughter rippled through the crowd. That nasal, Hollow kind of laughter that comes from people who've never worked a real day in their lives. Then Jen's voice cut through. My wife, standing at her table near the wedding party, chimed in with a theatrical sigh loud enough for everyone to hear. That's just my husband, she said, giving the CEO at her table a conspiratorial smile. He insists on dressing like that. It's his thing. I think he believes it's principled or something. More laughter. I didn't flinch. I've been expecting something like this, just not this soon. I checked my phone. The email had come in exactly 4 minutes earlier. Subject line, termination authorization, approved. Frank Millerson. Effective immediately. I didn't need to cause a scene. That's not how I operate. But I do believe in timing, and I don't believe in letting people walk off a cliff without at least showing them the edge first. I walked over to Brett, the groom, who was dabbing sweat off his forehead with a monogrammed napkin, leaned in close enough that only he could hear. You might want to read this, I said quietly, showing him my phone screen. His eyes scanned the email. First confused, then stunned, then something close to panic. His face went white, actually drained of color like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Then he turned fast, nearly knocked over a floral centerpiece, and marched across the lawn to where his father was still basking in his moment of superiority. I watched Brett grab Frank's arm and whisper something urgently. Frank blinked twice, his smile faltering. Then Brett said it louder, just loud enough for the nearby tables to catch. Dad, Brett's voice shook slightly. His company owns yours. You're fired. The words hung in the air like smoke. Frank's champagne glass tilted, spilling a slow golden line down his tuxedo sleeve. He didn't notice. He was staring at me like I'd just pulled a gun. The tables closest to them went silent first. Then the silence spread like a ripple across still water. Heads turned. Whispers started. I didn't say a word. Just walked back to the drink station and opened another warm Coke. Tasted about the same as the first. You'd be amazed how fast someone's attitude recalibrates when they realize the man they just mocked signs the checks that fund their lifestyle. The silence didn't last long. It never does. What followed was something between confusion and calculation. That moment when a room full of people suddenly realizes they've been laughing at the wrong person. I didn't move from my spot by the drink station. Just stood there, letting the moment breathe. Frank Millerson was still frozen, his champagne glass now dripping onto his polished shoes. Brett had stepped back, his face a mixture of shock and something that looked like respect he'd never shown his father before. Then I noticed movement. Robert Gelman, retired senior VP of logistics for one of the largest energy consultancies on the West Coast, was walking toward me. We'd crossed paths 12 years ago during a regional energy summit in Sacramento, negotiated a grid integration deal that saved his company millions. He was 73 now, moved slower, but his handshake was still firm when he reached me. Still wearing boots to weddings. I see, Gelman said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. I shook his hand. Still attending events you pretend to hate? He gave me a short chuckle, then leaned in. They're going to figure out too late, Rob. They always do. He patted my shoulder once and walked away. No fanfare, no explanation to anyone watching. Just a nod between men who understood how power actually works. More movement. Sarah Castellano, CEO of a mid-tier solar installation company that contracted with 2 of my farms, approached next. She didn't say anything at first, just extended her hand. When I shook it, she smiled. I should have connected the dots sooner, she said. Clearview Energy Holdings, the silent partner in half the renewable contracts in the Southwest. That's you, isn't it? I gave her the kind of nod that doesn't confirm anything, but doesn't deny it either. One by one, they came. A procurement officer from San Diego, a legislative aide who'd worked on energy policy, someone's uncle who used to do environmental law, but now just stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. These weren't Jen's social media friends or Frank's country club crowd. These were operators, people who recognized power when they saw it, even when it wore work boots and drank warm Coke. And then I saw her. Jen, my wife. The moment she noticed a shift in the room was like watching a computer try to process an error message it wasn't programmed for. She'd been mid-conversation with some executive, laughing at something he'd said, when she caught sight of Robert Gelman shaking my hand. Then Sarah Castellano. Then the others. Her smile froze. Not disappeared, just locked in place while her eyes tried to calculate what was happening. She excused herself from her table and started walking toward me. Not too fast, but with that rigid posture she used when she was trying to look in control while everything inside her was spinning. I turned slightly, deliberately, and engaged Sarah Castellano again before Jen could reach me. "We should talk Monday," I said to Sarah, loud enough for Jen to hear. "The restructuring might impact your installation contracts." Sarah nodded, already pulling out her phone. "Absolutely. I'll have my team prepare the projections." Jen stopped about 6 feet away. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Everything okay?" Her voice had that higher pitch she used when she was nervous. I didn't answer immediately, just met her gaze and held it. No anger, no sarcasm, just the unbearable calm of someone who sees through everything. "Can we talk?" she asked, taking a half step closer. I turned back to Sarah. "Monday morning, 9 sharp." "Yes, of course," Sarah said, reading the room perfectly. By the time I looked back at Jen, she'd stopped moving. Just stood there, caught between the person she thought she'd married and the reality she'd been too busy performing to notice. Behind her, I could see the bride, Jen's niece, watching with wide eyes. Brett was still near his father, but the dynamic had shifted. He wasn't consoling Frank. He was keeping distance, creating space between himself and the wreckage. The myth of who I was supposed to be had just shattered, and Jen was standing in the middle of the broken pieces, finally realizing she'd never actually known me at all. The drive home was 43 miles of silence, so thick you could choke on it. Jen sat in the passenger seat of my truck, staring out the window like the passing vineyards held answers she couldn't find anywhere else. She'd changed out of her heels into flats, but she still looked like she was wearing a costume, something that didn't fit the reality we were driving back to. I kept my eyes on the road. Highway 29 North, past the outlet malls and the roadside fruit stands. The truck's engine humming that familiar diesel rhythm I'd heard 1,000 times before. She finally spoke when we hit the city limits. "How long have you been planning this?" "Planning what?" I asked, not looking at her. "This. Today. Humiliating Frank in front of everyone. Humiliating me." I glanced at her briefly. "I didn't humiliate anyone, Jen. Frank did that himself. You helped." Her hands clenched in her lap. "I was making conversation. I didn't know you were going to..." She stopped, searching for the right words. "I didn't know you were going to ambush him like that." "Ambush," I repeated. Interesting word choice. What would you call it? Accountability. She turned her seat to face me. "You fired him at our niece's wedding, Rob." "At a wedding?" "No," I corrected. "I approved his termination 6 months ago when the audit flagged his fraud. I just moved up the date." That stopped her. "What fraud?" I merged onto the interstate, letting the question sit for a moment. "Frank's been skimming for vendor contracts for 3 years. Small amounts, buried under consulting fees for a company that doesn't exist anymore. He thought nobody was paying attention. I was. And you waited until today to do something about it." "I waited until the moment when it would mean the most," I said. "When he'd feel exactly what he tried to make me feel. Small. Irrelevant. Beneath him." Jen's voice dropped. "I didn't know." "Didn't know what?" "That Frank was a fraud? Or that I wasn't?" She flinched. "That's not fair. You call me out in front of 200 people, Jen. Said I dress like this because I think it's principled. Like it's some kind of character flaw." "I was joking. Were you?" The silence came back, heavier this time. We passed the exit for our neighborhood, but I kept driving. Jen noticed. "Where are we going?" "Nowhere," I said. "I just need to drive for a bit." She didn't argue, just sat there, staring at her hands. After another 10 miles, she spoke again, quieter now. "Why didn't you ever tell me? About Clearview. About what you actually do." "I did tell you," I said. "I told you I retired early. That I made investments. You never asked for details because you didn't want them. You wanted the version of me that made you feel important." "That's not true, isn't it?" I glanced at her. "You've been telling people for years that I'm your blue-collar husband. That I'm charmingly stubborn. That I don't understand how to dress for nice events. You build an entire identity around being married to someone you could feel superior to." Her eyes were wet now. "I never meant it like that. But that's how it landed, Jen. Every single time." I took the next exit, looped back toward home. The sun was setting behind us, casting long shadows across the dashboard. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "That depends," I said. "On what?" "On whether you actually want to know who I am, or if you just want to manage the story." She didn't answer. We pulled into the driveway 20 minutes later. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, hands still on the wheel. "For what it's worth," I said, "I never wanted this. I wanted a partner. Someone who saw me, not just the version they needed me to be." I got out of the truck and walked into the house, leaving her sitting there in the fading light. I was in my study at 6:30 the next morning when my phone rang. Not the work line, the personal one. Tyler's name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Morning, son." "Dad." His voice was tight, controlled. The voice he used when he was trying to hold something together. "What the hell happened yesterday?" I leaned back in my chair, watching the sunrise paint the walls gold through the window. "You're gonna need to be more specific." "Don't do that," Tyler said. "Don't play dumb. Mom called me at midnight, crying. Said you humiliated her at Aunt Rachel's wedding. Said you fired someone in front of 200 people." I approved determination. I corrected. "There's a difference. Dad, my roommate's father works in renewable energy consulting. He sent me an article this morning. Silent CEO of Clearview Energy Holdings confronts fraud at family wedding." "That's you, isn't it?" I didn't answer right away. Let him sit with it. "Dad." "Yeah, Tyler. That's me." Silence on the line. I could hear him breathing, processing. Then quieter. "How long?" "How long what?" "How long have you been running a solar energy empire, while letting me think you were just some retired guy who liked to tinker in his garage?" "Since before you were born," I said. "Built it from nothing. Sold my stake when you were 7, restructured under the trust. Been running it quietly ever since." More silence. Then Tyler's voice, harder now. "And you let me believe I earned my way into Wharton. Let me walk around campus telling people I was on scholarship while you were writing the checks. You did earn it," I said. "Your grades, your test scores, your application. All you. I just made sure money wasn't the reason you couldn't go." "That's not the same thing, Dad." "Isn't it?" He exhaled hard. The kind of breath that comes from realizing everything you thought you knew was built on sand. "Mom said you've been lying to us for years." "I never lied," I said. "I just didn't correct the assumptions people made, including your mother's." "That's semantics. That's survival, son. You think people treat you the same when they know you sign their paychecks? You think your mother would have married me if she'd known I was wealthier than everyone she was trying to impress?" Tyler went quiet. I'd hit something he didn't want to examine. "I need to think about this," he said finally. "Take your time. Is Madison calling you too?" "Not yet," I said. "But she will." He hung up without saying goodbye. I set the phone down and stared at it for a long moment. Then it rang again. Madison this time. I answered on the first ring. "Hey, sweetheart." "Dad." Her voice was different from Tyler's. Softer but steadier. "Mom called me last night. Told me what happened at the wedding. I figured she would. She said you own solar farms. Plural. She said you've been running companies under some trust and never told anyone." "That's accurate." Madison was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm not mad. That surprised me. No. I'm disappointed you didn't trust me enough to tell me. But I'm not surprised Mom didn't know. She never asked you real questions, Dad. She never wanted to know who you actually were." My throat tightened. "You noticed that?" "I've always noticed," Madison said. "She'd make those jokes at dinner parties. Call you her blue-collar husband, like it was endearing. But it wasn't. It was mean. She was making herself bigger by making you smaller." I closed my eyes. "Yeah. Tyler's upset because he feels stupid," Madison continued. "He told everyone at Wharton that he earned his scholarship without help. Now he thinks people are going to find out his dad bankrolled it and call him a fraud. He did earn it. I know that. You know that. But Tyler's pride is hurt. He'll come around. And you." Madison's voice softened. "I'm just sad you felt like you had to hide who you were. Even from us. I didn't want you growing up entitled," I said. "Didn't want you thinking money solved everything, or that you didn't have to work because your old man had it covered." "I get it," she said. "But Dad, we're adults now. We deserve to know." She was right. I knew she was right. "What happens now?" Madison asked. "With your mother?" "With everything." I looked out the window at the driveway. Jen's car was still there. She hadn't left. Hadn't come inside either. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "But I'm done pretending to be someone I'm not." "Good," Madison said. "You shouldn't have to." We talked for another 10 minutes before she had to go to class. When I hung up, I sat there in the quiet of my study, surrounded by the life I'd built in secret, and wondered if it had been worth it. The first article hit at 8:15. Local business blog, small circulation, but enough to get the ball rolling. Headline: Wedding disruption exposes corporate fraud and hidden identity. By 9:30, it had spread. A regional energy newsletter picked it up, then a corporate accountability website. By noon, someone had posted the video, 22 seconds long. Granny, shot on someone's phone from near the dessert table. Frank's voice, clear as day. Some folks just never evolve, still clinging to their blue-collar pride. Then Jen's laugh, her voice chiming in. That's just my husband. He insists on dressing like that. The video ended with a blurry shot of me showing Brett my phone, then Brett going pale. It went viral in the worst possible way. Not viral like a celebrity scandal. Viral like a case study in public humiliation. Business podcasters picked it up. Leadership coaches used it as an example of strategic silence. One consultant even wrote a LinkedIn post titled, "The Power of Underestimation. Lessons from a Solar CEO in Work Boots." Jen saw it around 1 in the afternoon. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard her phone buzz nonstop from the living room. She'd finally come inside around 8, gone straight to the guest room without a word. Now, she emerged, holding her phone like it was radioactive. "It's everywhere," she said, her voice hollow. "The video, the articles, everyone's sharing it." I poured my coffee, didn't look at her. "I know, you know." Her voice pitched higher. "This is destroying me, Rob. My friends are texting, asking if it's real. My boss just called, asked if I needed personal time to deal with a family situation. They're talking about me like I'm a scandal." "You are a scandal," I said quietly. "You mocked your husband in front of 200 people. Someone recorded it. Now people know." She slammed her phone on the counter. "I didn't know you were. I didn't know any of this. Because you never asked. That's not fair." I turned to face her. "Jen, I told you when we got married that I'd worked in energy and retired early. You never once asked what that meant. Never asked about my portfolio, my investments, what I actually did with my time. You were happy not knowing because it let you play the successful wife married to the humble retired guy." Her eyes were red. "I thought you were being modest. I was being private. There's a difference." She pulled out a chair and sat down hard, her head in her hands. "What do I tell people? The truth." "Which is what, exactly?" "That your husband built a renewable energy company from the ground up, retired early, and has been managing it quietly for years. That you made assumptions and never bothered to verify them." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "They're going to think I'm an idiot." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe they'll think you're a person who made a mistake. Either way, that's not my problem to solve." My phone buzzed. Text from Sarah Castellano. "Media is picking this up. You want me to issue a statement on behalf of Clearview?" I typed back. "No statement. Let play out." Jen watched me. "Who was that?" "Business. Business," she repeated bitterly. "You have a whole world I know nothing about." I corrected. "Past tense. You could have known. You chose not to." She stood up, wiping her eyes. "I'm going to my sister's." "Rachel's?" "The one whose wedding we just disrupted. She called this morning. She's upset, but she understands. She said Aunt Patricia told her Frank had it coming, that you'd given him more chances than he deserved." I raised an eyebrow. "Aunt Patricia said that. Apparently she worked in HR for an energy company 30 years ago. Recognized you at the reception. Told Rachel you were one of the good ones who actually cared about ethics. Small world." Jen grabbed her purse. "I need space to think, Rob. I need to figure out what this means." "Take your time," I said. She paused at the door. "Are we going to be okay?" I met her eyes. "I don't know, Jen. Depends on whether you want a real marriage or just want to fix your image." She left without answering. A week after the wedding, my phone rang at 2 in the afternoon. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Mr. Harrington." The voice was unfamiliar. Male, younger than mine. "This is Brett Millerson." I set down the report I'd been reading. "Brett, I know this is probably the last call you expected," he said. His voice was steady but carried weight, like a man who'd been doing a lot of thinking. "I want to talk to you. In person, if possible." "About what?" "About my father. About the wedding. About everything." We met at a coffee shop 40 minutes later. One of those places with exposed brick and baristas who took their craft too seriously. Brett was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth, looking like he hadn't slept in days. I slid into the seat across from him. "You look rough." I called off the wedding, he said without preamble. Well, postponed. Indefinitely. I nodded. How's your fiancé taking it? Better than I expected. She said she'd been having doubts anyway. Said my father made her uncomfortable at the rehearsal dinner. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Turns out everyone saw what I didn't want to see. Which is that my father's a fraud. A thief. A man who spent years stealing from people who trusted him while I defended him to anyone who'd listen. I flagged down a waitress, ordered black coffee. Brett already had a cup going cold in front of him. I went through his files. Brett continued. After you show me that email, I couldn't let it go. I found everything. The fake consulting contracts, the vendor kickbacks, the shell company he created in 2019. He stole almost $400,000 over 3 years, Mr. Harrington. I know. You knew all of it. Most of it. My audit team flagged it 6 months ago. I had legal verify everything before I moved forward. Brett's jaw tightened. Why did you wait? Why not fire him the moment you found out? Because firing him quietly wouldn't have changed anything, I said. He would have found another job, done it again, hurt more people. This way, everyone knows exactly who he is. The waitress brought my coffee. I took a sip, watching Brett process that. I hired a forensic accountant, Brett said finally. I want to trace every dollar, find everyone he stole from, figure out how to make it right. That's going to take time and money. I have time, and I'll figure out the money. He met my eyes. I also wanted to ask if you consider giving me a job. That surprised me. A job. I know it sounds crazy. I know my father just destroyed any goodwill you might have had toward my family. But I have a degree in energy policy from UC Davis. I've been working for a renewable consulting firm for the last 3 years, and I want to prove that I'm nothing like him. I studied him for a long moment. He didn't look away. What position are you looking for? The lowest one you have. I don't care if I'm answering phones or filing permits. I just want to learn from someone who actually has integrity. I set down my coffee cup. You understand that if I hire you, people are going to think it's charity, or guilt, or some kind of PR move. I understand, Brett said. But I also understand that you don't strike me as someone who cares what people think. Fair point. I'll think about it, I said. Send me your resume and a cover letter explaining why you want to work for the man who fired your father at your wedding. Brett's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Call me Rob. And Brett, if I do this, I'm going to work you harder than anyone else in that building. You're going to earn every dollar, every ounce of respect. No shortcuts. I wouldn't want it any other way. We shook hands. He left first, and I sat there with my coffee, thinking about second chances and whether everyone deserved them. My phone buzzed. Text from Madison. Mom's asking about you. Says she doesn't know how to fix this. I told her maybe she should try actually talking to you instead of performing for her friends. Love you, Dad. I smiled despite myself. At least one of my kids understood. Jen showed up at the house 5 days after the wedding. Didn't call ahead. Just pulled into the driveway in her sister's car at 3 in the afternoon while I was working in the garage. She got out slowly, like she was approaching a crime scene. I didn't stop what I was doing, just kept organizing the tools I'd let get scattered during the past week. Rob, she said from the doorway. We need to talk. So talk. She stepped inside, arms crossed. I want to see a lawyer. That got my attention. I set down the socket wrench and turned to face her. Did you? I wanted to know where I stood. Financially. Legally. If we. She trailed off, couldn't finish the sentence. If we what, Jen? If we get divorced. She flinched. I didn't say that, but you thought it loud enough to consult a lawyer. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying recently. I was scared, Rob. I didn't know what was happening. Everything I thought I knew turned out to be wrong, and I panicked. And what did the lawyer tell you? She swallowed hard. She showed me the prenup, the one we signed in Cabo before the wedding. I remember that day. Sunny, perfect, both of us tan and stupid in love. Or at least I thought we were. There's a clause, Jen continued, her voice shaking. Clause 14, about public disparagement. I remember. You remember? She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. You remember putting in a clause that says if I publicly humiliate you, I lose everything in a divorce. Your father's lawyer reviewed that prenup, Jen. He approved every word. Said it was standard protection for both parties. He thought you were a retired warehouse manager with a modest 401k, not a multimillionaire running solar farms across 3 states. I leaned against my workbench. And if he'd known the truth, what would have changed? Would your father have advised you not to marry me? Would you have cared more about who I actually was instead of who you wanted me to be? She opened her mouth, then closed it. No answer. The prenup's valid, Jen. It was notarized in California and Nevada. Filed properly. Updated twice. Once after we bought the house. Once after I restructured the solar holdings. Your signature's on both amendments. I don't remember signing amendments. You were in Napa with your book club when the first one arrived. Signed it next to the wine pairings menu. The second one you signed while on a Zoom call with your charity board. You barely read either one. Her face went pale. This isn't fair. What's not fair? That there are consequences for mocking your husband in front of 200 people? That the video of you laughing at me has 3.2 million views and has been cited in 4 business journals as an example of toxic relationship dynamics? I didn't know it would go viral. But you knew you were belittling me. You knew exactly what you were doing when you called me principled or something like it was a character flaw. She sank onto the stool by my workbench, head in her hands. The lawyer said I have no case. She said the clause is ironclad. She said if we divorce, I walk away with nothing except my personal belongings and my car. That's accurate. Rob, I can't. I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have money saved. My job barely covers my expenses as it is. I cross my arms. You could have had everything, Jen. Full partnership, full transparency, a real marriage built on actually knowing each other. But you didn't want that. You wanted the performance. The Instagram posts, the charity galas, the stories you could tell at brunch about your quirky blue-collar husband. So what happens now? She whispered. That depends on you, I said. You can either fight this, drag us both through a public divorce that you'll lose, or you can figure out if there's any part of our marriage worth saving. Is there? She looked up at me, tears streaming. Do you even want to try? I was quiet for a long moment. I don't know yet, Jen. I really don't. She left 20 minutes later, no closer to an answer than when she'd arrived. I watched her drive away and wondered if either of us had ever really known the other at all. 2 months after the wedding, I stood in a conference room on the 14th floor of the Westin in downtown Sacramento. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Capitol building, and the room was filled with 300 people who'd paid $500 each to attend the Western Renewable Energy Summit. I'd been invited to speak, not as Robert Harrington, the guy who wore work boots to weddings, as the chairman of Clearview Energy Holdings, the silent partner behind 15% of California solar infrastructure. The moderator, a woman named Dr. Patricia Chun, who ran Stanford's energy policy program, stood at the podium introducing me. Our next speaker needs no introduction to those who've been paying attention. For years, he's operated in the margins, building one of the most efficient solar operations in the country, while the rest of us were busy making noise. Please welcome Robert Harrington. Applause. Polite at first, then building. I walked to the podium in the same boots I'd worn to the wedding, same jeans, button-down shirt instead of a suit. Some people in the front row exchanged glances. Others smiled like they got the joke. I didn't prepare notes. Didn't need them. I'm going to tell you something most people don't want to hear. I started. Power isn't about being seen. It's about being effective. For 23 years, I built solar farms while everyone else built personal brands. And you know what? My panels still generate electricity when the cameras aren't rolling. Some laughter, some uncomfortable shifting. I spoke for 18 minutes, talked about quiet leadership, about building infrastructure instead of Instagram followings, about the difference between making noise and making change. When I finished, the applause was immediate. Standing ovation from the back half of the room. Afterward, people lined up to shake hands. CEOs, policymakers, investors who'd heard the wedding story and wanted to know if it was true. I confirmed nothing, denied nothing, just listened and moved on to the next person. Then I saw her, Madison, my daughter, standing near the back of the room in her med school sweatshirt, smiling. I excused myself from a conversation with a state senator and walked over. What are you doing here? You think I'd miss this? Madison said, You finally stepped into the light, Dad. I want to see it. Where's your brother? Tyler's still processing. He'll come around. He texted me last week, said he's been thinking about everything differently. Give him time. We grabbed coffee in the hotel lobby afterward. Madison told me about her anatomy final, about the research project she was working on, about a guy in her study group who'd asked her out. Normal life, the kind I'd been missing while everything else was falling apart. Mom's been asking about you. Madison said carefully. I'm sure she has. She's been staying with Aunt Rachel. Working on herself, she says. Going to therapy. I raised an eyebrow. Therapy. Twice a week. She said the lawyer told her the only way to save the marriage was to figure out why she needed to make you small to feel big. That was more self-awareness than I'd expected. And what do you think? Madison stirred her coffee. I think she's scared. I think she finally realized what she had and what she's about to lose. But Dad, I also think she's actually trying. For the first time since I can remember. Trying doesn't erase 20 years of performance. No, Madison agreed. But it's a start. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Madison reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you. Not because of the solar farms or the money or any of that. I'm proud because you refuse to be smaller than you are, just to make someone else comfortable. My throat tightened. Thanks, sweetheart. She left to catch her flight back to Baltimore. I sat in the lobby for another hour, watching people come and go, thinking about second chances and whether everyone deserved them equally. My phone buzzed. Text from Brett Millerson. First day, starts Monday. Ready to earn it. Thank you for the opportunity. I'd hired him 2 weeks ago. Started him in permit compliance, the most tedious position in the company. He'd sent weekly updates ever since, detailed reports showing he was actually doing the work. Another text, this one from Jen. I saw your speech online. You were incredible. I'm sorry I never let myself see that before. Can we talk? Really talk? I stared at the message for a long time. Then I put the phone away without responding. Some conversations needed more than text messages. They needed eye contact, honesty, and time I wasn't sure I had to give yet. But maybe, someday, maybe. For months later, I was in my garage on a Saturday morning, rebuilding a solar inverter from one of our older farms, when I heard a car pull into the driveway. Not Jen's car, Tyler's beat-up Honda that he'd driven cross-country from Wharton. I set down my tools and walked outside. Tyler was getting out of the car, looking thinner than I remembered, tired but somehow lighter. Hey, Dad, he said. Tyler. We stood there awkwardly for a moment. Then he closed the distance and hugged me. Tight, the way he used to when he was 10 years old, and I'd come home from a long business trip. I'm sorry, Tyler said when he pulled back. I've been an idiot. A proud, stubborn idiot. You came by it honestly. He laughed, but it was shaky. I've been talking to my business ethics professor. Told him about you, about the wedding, about everything. He said what you did was a masterclass in accountability. Said most CEOs would have handled it quietly, protected the fraud to avoid bad press. You did the opposite. I did what was right. Yeah, Tyler said. You did. And I spent 2 months being mad at you for making me look stupid when you were actually showing me what integrity looks like. We went inside. I made coffee while Tyler sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd had 1,000 family dinners, where he'd done homework and Madison had practiced her Spanish vocabulary. Mom called me last week, Tyler said. She's different, calmer. Said she's been working with a therapist to understand why she treated you the way she did. Madison mentioned, are you going to give her another chance? I poured 2 cups, slid one across to him. I don't know yet. Part of me wants to believe people can change. Another part remembers 20 years of being diminished. That's fair, Tyler said. But Dad, for what it's worth, I think she's actually trying. She asked me what I remembered about you growing up. I told her I remembered you at every soccer game, every school play, every parent-teacher conference. I told her you were the most present father I knew, even when I thought you were just a regular retired guy. And what did she say? She cried. Said she'd been so focused on what you weren't that she never saw what you were. We drank our coffee in comfortable silence. Then Tyler pulled out his phone. I want to show you something. He turned the screen toward me. A LinkedIn post, published that morning. It was Tyler's professional headshot with a long caption underneath. I've spent the last 4 months learning a hard lesson about assumptions. My father built an empire while I assumed he was ordinary. He funded my education while I assumed I'd earned it alone. He showed integrity while I assumed he was just being stubborn. I was wrong about all of it. Today, I'm grateful for a father who taught me that real power doesn't need an audience. It just needs conviction. #leadership, #integrity, #family first. The post had 2,000 likes already. Comments from his classmates, professors, people I'd never heard of. You didn't have to do that, I said. Yeah, I did. I needed people to know, and I needed you to know that I finally get it. An hour later, my phone rang. Jen. I looked at Tyler. who nodded encouragingly. I answered, "Hello, Jen." "Rob." Her voice was different, softer, less performed. "I saw Tyler's post, and I've been sitting here thinking about what I want to say to you. What I need to say. I'm listening. I was wrong. About everything. About who you were, about what mattered, about what kind of partnership we should have had. I spent 20 years making you small because I was afraid of being smaller than you. And I'm so sorry." I closed my eyes. "Jen, I'm not asking you to forgive me," she continued. "I'm not asking you to take me back or pretend none of this happened. I'm just asking if you'd be willing to sit down with me and my therapist. Let me try to explain what I'm learning about myself. Let me try to show you I'm capable of change." I looked at Tyler, who was watching me carefully. Looked out the window at the solar panels I'd installed on our roof years ago, generating quiet power that nobody saw but everyone benefited from. "One session," I said finally. "I'll come to one session. After that, we'll see." "Thank you," Jen whispered. "That's more than I deserve." Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. But I'd spent my whole life building things from the ground up, and maybe marriages weren't so different. Maybe they could be rebuilt too, with better materials and honest foundations. 8 months after the wedding, I stood in a different conference room. This time, it was our solar farm in Fresno, and I was shaking hands with Brett Millerson, who'd just been promoted to junior project manager after proving himself in ways his father never had. "Congratulations," I said. "Earned it," Brett replied with a tired smile. "Every late night, every permit filing, every thankless task you threw at me. And you'll earn the next promotion too." He laughed. I wouldn't expect anything less. Madison visited for Thanksgiving. Tyler came too. Even Jen showed up, hesitant but trying. We ate turkey and avoided the hard topics, but there was something different in the air. Something honest. We weren't fixed. We might never be what we were, or what we could have been, but we were real now. No performances, no pretending, no hiding behind versions of ourselves we thought other people needed to see. That night, after everyone left, I sat on my back porch and looked up at the stars. Thought about Frank Millerson, wherever he was now, probably still bitter, still blaming everyone but himself. Thought about all the people who'd mocked me over the years for wearing work boots and driving an old truck. And I smiled, because at the end of the day, the sun still rises. The panels still convert light to energy. The work still gets done, and the man in the boots, he's still standing.